And thanks everyone for joining us today. And thanks to Dave Finney from Polycom, who is going to present some of the details around the Polycom solution a little bit later in the webinar. Now we're going to start today. We're going to kind of break the session into two pieces. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about the ribbon aspects of our solution, and then Dave is going to take over and spend some time talking about the Polycom Plantronics solutions. So with that, let me jump right in and kind of start by making sure that everyone on the webinar is familiar with who Ribbon Communications is. And Ribbon is a relatively new name. We've only had the name for about a year or so, but it represents actually three strong brands in telecommunications: Sonos Networks, Genband, and most recently Edgewater Networks. The combined entities, represent really decades of voice over IP and telephony experience, and today we have right around 2,300 employees. The merger of these three organizations has really given us both breadth and strength in this marketplace, and I think has really made us a more viable competitor in the DoD space. And we'll talk about some of the combined solutions and why those really should have an impact on what you all are doing in your day-to-day operations. So let me start with a little bit of background. Since this webinar is titled, Nortel Migrations, I think it's important to understand the connection between Ribbon and Legacy Nortel. So as I mentioned just a moment ago, Ribbon is really the roll-up of Sonos, Genband, and Edgewater into a single entity. And in 2010, what was then Genband acquired the Nortel Carrier Group. As part of that effort, they acquired the intellectual property and rights to what was the CS2000 and the DMS portfolio. For those of you who kind of have your Nortel hats on, you'll recognize that those really were the foundation for what the SL-100 and CS2100 that are widely deployed throughout the DoD, as well as the AS5300. So ultimately, what's ended up happening is that Ribbon owns the intellectual property and software associated with those platforms in one manner or another. Because of that, we also own some intellectual property. While we don't own the CS1000 portfolio itself or the AS5300 itself, we own a lot of intellectual property that is directly applicable to those solutions. And so over the last several years, we've invested heavily in coming up with solutions that enable those legacy Nortel platforms to move forward, and more importantly, to protect some of the investment that you have in those solutions. And as a result of that, we have a very significant presence in government, both on the DoD and intelligence side, as well as the civilian and federal. And now I know this is a webinar focused primarily on JEDEC solutions, but I think it is germane because many of the federal deployments are equally large, sophisticated deployments and reflect migrations of legacy Nortel environments. I'll talk about it a little bit further, but we have a relatively new and public deployment in a DoD Command and Control Center, which is a migration of an AS5300. And then we have deployments in all of the major armed forces, as well as multiple security agencies. And then, of course, a variety of civilian environments. And some of those involve specific elements like our application server, a session border control solution, and some are complete end-to-end offers depending on the deployment environment. So where do we fit best in the DoD? I think that's a very legitimate question probably for many of you, because obviously you may be familiar with some of our competitors. There's 2 or 3 other vendors in this space who we directly compete with. Really, what makes us different than our competitors is a few key things. One, tremendous scale. So as I mentioned, earlier, we acquired the Nortel carrier business, and we have a long history amongst our pieces of company in service provider. As a result of that, really nobody in the enterprise space, so the Ciscos, the Avayas, the NECs, has the kind of scalable solution that we have. That makes it very well suited for large sites as well as multi-site private cloud deployments. And I know that the DoD is more and more interested in finding ways to roll together multiple sites into a single environment. You know, many of our competitors claim that they have scale, but the reality is when you get over, 10,000 or 15,000, what ends up happening is they have to glue together multiple boxes to create a scalable solution. Because of our carrier heritage, it's easy for us to roll together 100,000 or 200,000 seats in a single environment. The way we scale it, we scale all the assets inside the solution independently, so it's easy for us to create these kind of large deployments, and we've done it. Security is also a big area of expertise, particularly some of you may know the Siemens Portfolio of SBCs. They've been JITC certified for a number of years, and we have both hardware and all software solutions. We know how to do migration. We've done it on a number of large civilian and DoD projects, so that's a skill set we have from a professional services and partner perspective. Everything we do is geo-redundant. We can help you develop a disaster recovery plan. Again, we have that deployed in certain environments. Everything we make is standards-based. One of the reasons my peer Dave Finney is here on this webinar is because we've been working for a number of years with Polycom on open SIP-based endpoints. Most of our competitors are still using some sort of proprietary endpoint, which locks you as an entity into their solution indefinitely. That's not the case for us. We also have a solution for large volumes of analog phones. If you go out to, I don't need to tell most of the people in this audience, if you go out to a large military base, there might easily be 10, 15,000 analog lines out there. They're on legacy cable. They're connected in legacy environments where there's no power over Ethernet, maybe not even any Ethernet at all. We have solutions for that. We'll talk about it more. And then, of course, because of our intellectual property and experience, it's easy for us relative to our competitors to migrate a Nortel deployment. But I want to point out, if you have a legacy 5E or a big Definity or Rohm Siemens switch, maybe an old Harris 2020 or an Ericsson MD110 or something of that ilk, we can support migration of that as well. So all of those things really, I think, give us a fit advantage over our competitors. So what problems are we here to solve? Well, we get it. We understand. There are a number of players in this space that have left the market, or they've changed their solutions for JITC such that it makes it hard for departments or agencies to move forward with what they have and leverage some of their existing investment. We understand that oftentimes what our competitors propose for an upgrade is really just completely starting over. And while we're going to spend a lot of time in this webinar talking about how you can migrate a legacy solution, it's important for you to understand that we have a complete UCNC solution for full collaboration. We can do all of the PC clients and mobility services that, are typically required in a modern communications environment. So while we'll spend a bunch of time talking about that migration, I don't want to discount the fact that we understand that you have a need to move to more modern tools for your day-to-day workers. So one of the challenges we've seen in this marketplace, and perhaps many of you have too, is the fact that there's a gap between the perceived value and the real value of the PBX solution you have in place. And this is probably acutely understood for some of the telecom managers who are listening in. It's not uncommon for people to sort of assume that the PBX that they have on base or site isn't really doing much anymore. I don't get phone calls. I use my cell phone, right? No one wants a phone on their desk. Why do I have it? So on and so forth. Well, unfortunately, what people don't understand is that there are a lot of things that the PBX is still responsible for and connects a lot of pieces of an organization together. And in a crisis type situation where you might need, say, an MLPP environment where you need to determine who has access to communications from a rank and responsibility perspective, the PBX is still the only tool that can do that. So we appreciate the fact that for some of you, it's a big challenge to go out and get the funding and sort of the agency impetus to make this happen. But we're here to help with that, and we understand it, and we can help you through that process, because when you really dig in, you recognize there's still an awful lot that a PBX solution has to deliver. In terms of Ribbon itself and what we offer, we really can break our solution down into four key aspects. We have a full UC platform. That's our application server, again, JITC certified, scalable to millions of seats. We have a complete session border control portfolio, so not just one, but multiple assets. We have a high-density analog gateway. I mentioned this a second ago, 768 ports. This is really the ideal solution for preserving legacy cabling. In some cases, cabling may cost you more than the whole rest of the deployment. And of course, we support open endpoints, and I'm going to leave it to Dave to talk in detail about how the Polycom portfolio can help in that regard. In terms of our certifications, we have two different types of certs. We have a LSC certification. You can kind of see a high-level view here of that. Basically, we can leverage our session border controllers to connect into the PSTN or into the DISA network. You can leverage our application server as a local session controller. You can build that out in a local or geo redundancy model, and then you can put a series of gateways like our G5 or endpoints like the Polycom endpoints, as well as analog devices down at the end user level. And you can, of course, so you can keep that all on a single site, and this is probably typically how a legacy CS2100 or SL100 or CS1000 is deployed in the DoD today. This is similar to some of the sample deployments I'll talk about in a little bit. Very scalable, as I said. You can take this architecture and scale it to millions of seats. Obviously, in LSC deployment, it's probably more likely to top out at 50, 75, or maybe 85,000 seats. You can also connect these sites together if you wanted to using the DISA network or SIP trunks. Now, if we move into an ESC type deployment, then what we can actually do in this environment is take all the same assets you saw on the prior page and push those up into a private cloud environment. So in that environment, the session border controllers are essentially up in the cloud, and while they still can be used northbound to connect into the PSTN or the DISA network, they also can function as a southbound interface to connect all of the remote IP endpoints, gateways, and analog devices. So in this environment, because you're in a private cloud, you could literally have hundreds, even thousands of sites all connected to the same common private cloud, single dial plan, single directory, really almost infinite scale here. The cloud type environment I'm showing there could scale to 2 million seats using the same infrastructure. So really, regardless of your deployment model, you can take the same set of core assets that we make and roll those out and use them in the way that you see fit. And of course, you could also start out in an LSC model and eventually migrate to an ESC model and not lose any of your investment. In terms of what runs the core of this solution, it is the Ribbon application server. What's kind of interesting about this solution, it traces its heritage back to the same software and solutions that drive the AS5300. So the core of this originally came from a Nortel design. Obviously, over the last almost 10 years, we've worked aggressively to modernize the platform. It's fully virtualized. It's all SIP-based. There's no proprietary call control. You can essentially build the elements and scale them independently. So if you need more media resources, if you need more database resources, you can simply add a virtual machine and scale that. It's all geographically redundant. It runs in vSphere type model. It supports SIP and ASIP. And, you know, we have this deployed all over the world. We have it deployed in the DoD itself, but also we have it deployed in civilian environments and commercial environments. Roughly 27 million seats deployed across the globe, and probably 150 service providers in addition to the DoD. From a security perspective, full portfolio of SBCs are all JEDEC certified. Yeah, looking sort of going from the bottom up, full software only type deployment. So if you want to put it on COTS hardware, you want to virtualize it, you can use our SBC suite for that. If you prefer to have a dedicated hardware and just buy a turnkey, we have multiple models of our SBC. They all leverage basically the same software suite, depending on the scale that you need. So something like the 5110, which supports about 10,000 sessions, up to something like the SBC 7000, which will do 150,000 sessions. All again designed for high availability. So there's no question, if you get into a situation where you're concerned about denial of service attacks, if you're concerned about media transcoding, if you're concerned about being able to manage something like a threat at the same time that you know, live calls are going through, that's what these kind of platforms are designed for. Some of our competitors will claim scale, they'll claim some of the same feature functionality, but I think our core difference here, again, because of the carrier-grade nature of what we do, is the fact that we can handle that denial of service attack or some other kind of security threat. We can handle the transcoding and the day-to-day calls that have to go in and out of this box concurrently, so that there's no chance that because somebody has tried to apply some sort of threat to the network that calls are going to be impacted. We have a G5 analog gateway. This is, I think, really critical, as I mentioned a minute ago, to the many of you out there. People just don't think of analog anymore. Everyone gets excited about the fact that they have soft clients and other solutions, but analog lines are running things like security services, they're running door phones, they're running elevators, they're running all kinds of services across a campus or base. And the reality is that people have hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars of copper underneath the ground that is not necessarily accessible. We have examples all the time where a building has asbestos up in the ceilings, and there's no ability to go up there and rewire. The G5 is a perfect solution for that, as I mentioned. 768 ports per chassis, so incredibly scalable. It has very long loop links. What I mean by that is the fact that it can support thousands and 5 miles, thousands of feet of copper, so you don't have to worry about moving. What you see happen with a lot of traditional enterprise equipment is you end up having to move the MDF because you need to put basically the analog gateways very, very close to the analog devices. What that means is you have to find rack space and closet space, then you have to have backup power, and you have to have air conditioning because you've created all this heat from the UPS and these analog gateways in some little closet in a room somewhere, which was never designed for it. So the G5 solves all of these sort of practical problems. It's also important to know that G5 is just a SIP gateway. So if you do get in a situation where you want to leverage it for some other variation where you need another type of SIP server as the head end, it will absolutely work in that environment. And the exact same thing for the SBCs. If you have a migration environment that's not all ribbon-based and you need a session border controller for that solution, absolutely, these are standards-based solutions and will work in concert. And additionally, the AS will work in concert with other assets. That may or may not impact JEDEC certification, but it's an option out there. I mentioned at the beginning, in addition to the migration aspects of the solution, we do have a full UCNC portfolio. That means web collaboration tools, PC and Mac soft clients, as well as mobile clients, all integrated into the solution. They have presence, they have instant messaging, they have common directory. They'll work in concert with a hard phone or as a standalone solution, depending on the application. They'll work in either environment. We also have a function called Call Grabber, which allows you to take a live call and move it seamlessly between these devices. So you can literally start out a call on a Polycom hard phone and move it over to a soft client and walk around the building, as the case may be. In discussing those hard clients, one of the things that we've run into in the last few years as we've done a number of DoD migrations is the challenges associated with the traditional feature functionality that's on phones. Now, as I mentioned, some of you may get pushback occasionally about what the PBX is doing, but when you dig in, of course, what you find is there's a lot of people still using those traditional features. They may use them differently than they used to. They may use different aspects of them, but they're still there. And when you go to do a migration, it's critical that those services be available, because if they're not, they're going to slow down the whole migration process. So we have all those traditional, what I call TDM or digital features, available on the endpoints that Dave is going to discuss. So if you need shared line appearance like boss secretary, you need hunt groups, you need call routing rules, all of those things are available on the Polycom endpoints that Dave's going to discuss. So kind of wrapping it up, what do we think makes us unique? Really is, I mentioned, it is that ability to migrate from the digital to the SIP world with a transparent feature set. It's the ability to add new services like UCNC and the ability to seamlessly move away from some of the legacy hardware and software that many of you have on your basis that it is aging to the point where it becomes a real risk in terms of the mission you serve. We've done it already. If you go ahead and look up at our website, if you visit, we have a dedicated site to JITC certified solutions. It's jitic.rbbn.com. If you go up there, you can find a press release outlining this deployment at the DoD. For obvious reasons, we can't get into all the details, but this is a deployment that involves over 60,000 SIP endpoints. We brought it live. Of course, it took a lot of planning, but we brought it live over a single weekend. It leverages our JITC certified application server and Polycom phones. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dave to spend a couple of minutes talking about the Polycom solution.
Well, great. Thanks, Greg. And I just want to emphasize for you all out there that we work really hard and have a really good relationship with the folks at Ribbon to make sure that our endpoints work. We're an open SIP endpoint company, everything standards based, and we worked really hard over the last 5 years to make sure that that all of our products interop very well with the application server. So we're proud of that, and we're excited to be able to talk to you about it and what that means for you. So I'm going to introduce well, first, let's jump to the next slide, Greg. So for those of you that didn't know, we were acquired by Plantronics in the July timeframe. So July 1st, I think the deal actually closed. So now we're a combined company, and we're working really hard. Seems like there's a lot of hard work going on, but we're working really hard to combine the companies. And what this does for us is it brings a really fully featured endpoint story to Polycom that we haven't had before. Now with Plantronics on board, we have headsets and some of the capabilities around headsets and headset management and software, things that our partners have been asking us for a long time. So if you look at what Polycom brings, we've always brought strong conferencing and conferencing phone capabilities. Back in 1991 when we launched the company, it was all about the conference phone, that little triangular starfish-shaped conference phone that you see on desk, and many of those are still out there and deployed, crazy as that may seem in the analog and digital environments. And then we have Polycom desktops. We'll look at those in a few minutes, and we have video infrastructure and video endpoints, and we are video capable with the AS in a JITC environment, and I'll show you that in a little bit later, and a full suite of services. So now we add the headsets onto those capabilities. So with Plantronics has a extensive headset portfolio, and they also have software to manage it, and we'll talk about that as well. So we think that the merger is going to create some incredible strengths because we're both voice-focused companies. A lot of patents out there for voice, both from Plantronics and Polycom, and our jobs have been, for both companies, is to create the best user experience that we can. And that's why we partner up with the folks like Ribbon to create those really good user experience, some of which Greg already mentioned, and we'll continue to talk about those. So it's a complete portfolio, like you show on this slide. So we have the phones, we have ATAs. So Greg talked about analog with the G5s. There's still a lot of analog devices out there, fax machines, door environments, or elevator buttons, things that you may want to convert to IP. And we can do that. Polycom has a full suite of APAs based on our OBHI acquisition way back last January. So those ATAs are now Polycom branded and sellable, and we've actually got them interopt and working with the application server. Haven't done any work in specifically in JITC, but I don't think that's going to be an issue. Full set of headsets, conference devices like you're used to. And then just so you know, Polycom, some of you may not know this, but Polycom has a full suite of video endpoints as well, from anything from small room desktop video devices to large room, where we can actually build a room inside a room and provide excellent sound quality through hanging speakers and mics and multiple screens, multiple cameras, things like that create a really good conference environment. And then the collaboration piece. So we're all about unified collaboration. We have an infrastructure product suite that we call Clarity that I know we've run through JITC as well. And I'll talk about how we work with the AS as we go through the slides. So if you the next one, Greg. So this is the existing line of phones that you're familiar with, that many of you are familiar with, and there are deployments going on in the DoD space and in the federal government, and also Greg talked about hospitality and service providers. So there's a lot of Polycom phones being deployed on the application server. What we're going to talk about next is the phones that replace the VBX101 through the VBX411. So Greg, if you can jump to the next slide. In June, we offered out this new product set. It's called the VBX50 Series. It was time for a refresh. Some of the old VBX, the older legacy VBX phones, had been around for 5, 6, 7 years. We determined that we can do some things cheaper. We can do some things better with new plastics and new speakers. Of course, over time, everything changes. And so you want to make sure that you're using the best quality products to build your devices. So we believe that this line is going to be a really good seller for us. And what's really interesting about this line compared to the old VBX line is that they run the same software. So for you all that are looking to deploy the newer line, you don't have to look at and say, gosh, do I need to go to a new set of software and a new way of configuring the phones? Absolutely not. And what we found in our lab testing and with the AS folks and with our service providers and other people that are deploying, they simply take one phone and swap it out for another phone, and it comes up and runs. Same configuration file, same software. And the better news is that the VBXs, the Gen 2s, the ones that we showed on the other slide, those won't be end of sale or end of life for a significant amount of time. We won't even announce end of sale. I don't suspect we'll announce end of sale till late 2019, and then end of support will be 5 to 7 years afterwards. So you can still buy those phones, still deploy them until we see what the run rate is on these phones and the uptake is and how we can feed the channel. But I think a couple things that you'll notice, the 150, the VBX 150 there on your left is a relatively inexpensive phone now. You'd put that in your lobby or hang it on a wall for just basic phone calls. You're not going to do anything special with it, but it's got a really good price point. Moving up to the 250, where the 300 series, the 201 and the 300 series in the old legacy Gen 2 products lived, you'll see that in this we've added a USB port where we didn't have that on those earlier phones, and we've also added a color screen. And we've changed some of the way that the screens are moved through as well. The navigation, you'll see the wheel is in the middle of the device and not at the edge. We've added a backspace button, so we've freed up a soft key. So there are things that we've done based on our experience with the VBX that we believe makes the user experience on these phones better. When you move up to the 350, you'll see it actually has a USB port, which the old 300 didn't, and it also has a color screen and 6 lines. And then the 450 has 12 lines and 2 USB ports, and they're all gigi, and they're all priced within what we consider competitive markets. So, and from my perspective, look, my team's the team that works with the Ribbon folks to make sure that these phones interop. Your sales teams that hopefully you're familiar with, your Polycom sales teams, will work with you on all the pricing aspects. The pricing I show here is MSRP, what the right device is for your solution, etc. I just got to make sure it works, and that's what we're talking about today. Everything that you see here works with the AS and works in a JITC environment. Can you go to the next slide, Greg? So a couple things that we've changed in this, just really quickly. We've changed the way you can brand. So you can see at the top there, that color screen, you can brand down the middle. The line keys are on both sides. We have the ability to do that branding, and we also have the ability to brand the Mylar screen where you see the Polycom at the top. That thing pops off, and it could be branded any way you want it to, depending on what you wanted to do. But we're really interested in creating, again, a better user experience, not only by the way it looks and feels, but by the way the buttons act, the way the handset feels. And so we think we've done a really good job of that. And again, we've been able to help on the pricing a little bit as well. Next slide, Greg. We do have some accessories. One of the things that you'll notice, that I noticed right off when I started messing around with this phone, is that I don't have a 2-cable power supply system anymore. I have a single brick that plugs into a wall with a long cable that plugs into the phone, as opposed to that the normal power brick in the middle of the cable thing where you had to have 2 cables to actually to power the device. We do have wall mounts for it. And then the really interesting thing is the Wi-Fi USB dongle. So if you're in an environment where you need a phone on Wi-Fi because you don't have Ethernet cabling, we have a dongle that plugs into any of the phones that support a USB port, and you're able to get up on a Wi-Fi network, and that Wi-Fi is configured through the phone UI. So the SSID and the password, et cetera, are all configured through the phone UI. I've worked with it in hotels. Worked great. You know, you go into a hotel, you're trying to do a demo or something. You get up on the hotel wireless network, as bad as those are at times, and you're able to make phone calls and do things like that. So really a good feature to have if you're in an environment where you don't have that cabling. Next, Greg. One of the things that we talk about innovation all the time when we talk about Polycom and how we're innovators in this space, especially when it comes to voice quality and UI, user experience. Well, one of the things that we've done, and this is we've added way back in 5.3 a couple of years ago, we added the ability to support a feature called Acoustic Fence. And what Acoustic Fence does is it uses the microphone, the speaker microphone, and it compares what's coming in on that speaker microphone to what's coming in on a headset or a handset. So if you're on a handset or a headset, it is actually comparing the two levels, and it's mitigating or eliminating all the noise that it hears on the speaker mic. So if you're in a noisy environment, an open cubicle type environment, a call center environment, or a noisy place, you know, mechanic shop, or somewhere where there's noise, restaurant, background noise, that background noise is eliminated. So the caller now doesn't hear all of that, isn't distracted by all the noise that's going around the actual user of that phone. It's free. It's just a couple of features that turn on. It's well supported in the AS environment, and a lot of people are deploying all their phones now with this just turned on automatically. And that way you can eliminate that noise and have a much clearer conversation with the people that are calling into your environments. Next, Greg. Big hitter for us in the last year or so is this idea of device management. And what we've done is we've created a cloud services. This is a private cloud service. We also have one for the service provider space, but it's called PDMS, Polycom Device Management Service. It's the ability to provision your phones. Now, you really don't need to provision your phones if you're using an application server because they have many provisioning systems, but it gives you the ability to manage the phones and really be able to grab some analytics, diagnostics, packet captures, things like that off the phones that you've never been able to do before without actually having to send somebody to a location to pick that up. So really good opportunity for you. And again, your local sales teams have a lot more detail on this and how it would architect and fit into your environments. But it can be hosted on your within your network, or it can be cloud hosted as well. But the idea is that you're now able to manage phones in an over-the-top network environment, or even locally on your own network, where you haven't been able to do that before. And we think it eliminates a lot of time, the ability to pull information from those phones, configuration information, to do some basic troubleshooting, look at log files, look at packet captures, things like that, without having to go run to the phone or call somebody up and have them push buttons for you or put probes on your network is really super important. Next slide, Greg. So the ability to stage, deploy, and maintain is what this cloud service is all about. And again, we can get you hooked up with your local sales teams if you don't know who they are, and they can give you a greater detailed dive into this and how it fits into your architecture. But understand that this is out here. This is something unique to Polycom, and we're pretty excited about it. We have a version for the service provider space as well as the enterprise space. It depends on what you want to do and what you're doing. So next slide, Greg. So the Polycom Trio, as we talk about video endpoints, this is also an audio endpoint. So imagine, if you will, you have a conference room and you want to put a really good conferencing device in there. You put the Polycom Trio in there. Works well with the AS. It's part of our JITC certification. I'll show you that in a little bit. But this also expands to a collaboration device, a UC device, if you will, by adding that little box on the right, which we call Visual Plus, and a camera, and you have a choice of 3 with this 8800. You have now you've gone from a middle-of-the-room conference phone to an end-of-the-room video device, a UC device. It works very well. Video works very well with the AS. So we can do point-to-point video and multi-point video. We can do client to Trio video as well. So if you're looking to move to video, we have an endpoint that's really easy for you to deploy, a multi-purpose endpoint that's really easy for you to deploy and work with, because the AS just considers it another phone for all practical purposes. Next slide. We also have a smaller version of this device, 8500. That was the 8800 that we showed you. It's a little bit cheaper, about $500 cheaper than the 8800, but still allows you to put that Visual Plus box on there, and allows you to put a camera on. Now, we don't have the camera flexibility that we have with the 8800. As a matter of fact, the 8800, we will have another Visual Plus device that will allow you to do multiple monitors, multiple cameras. That device, that product is out this fall. So it's something that we can talk to you about if you're looking for a more sophisticated video experience. But those devices are out there and they're available. From a JITC perspective, I think Greg's hurrying me along because he's changing slides on me, but from a JITC perspective, we do a lot of testing with the application server. As a matter of fact, the month of October, we spent in the labs in Fort Huachuca, and we've tested out this new VBX Series 50 that we just showed you here on 5.8.1 software, and we've had some successful tests. And the folks, our friends at Ribbon, are working through the paperwork, which we expect to be all completed by end of November, and on the APL hopefully by the end of the year. So the 5.8.1 software has been tested, and that works on all of the Polycom VBXs, all the way to legacy, as well as the new ones. So be aware of that. MLPP for SCA, so we've had that available, or will be available in Q1 19. So we're actually adding more to our MLPP capabilities. We are MLPP compatible now, and we work in MLPP environments as of last winter, as of last March or so, with the AS. We're adding SLA capabilities. We're the only vendor that's going to support the SLA capabilities with Ribbon, so we're pretty excited on that. And what helps us really work together well is that we have an AS now in our development lab. So we have our own version. We're adding a second one in our development lab in Austin, Texas, and then we have VPN capabilities between the Ottawa labs and our India development labs. So this MLPP SLA thing, for example, we have been co-developing via VPN, where their AS in Ottawa is attached to our phones in Hyderabad, and we continue to drop new loads of software and make changes, et cetera, and do testing. And so we're walking lockstep. As a matter of fact, there's a conference call going on right now between our India folks and the Ottawa folks from Ribbon to talk about this as we continue to target this rollout at the end of the year. It'll be in our 5.9 software and in their 12.1. So that'll be available, really first quarter. So we're really excited about the opportunity to have the ASs in our labs and to have the VPN connection between the labs. It really, really helps the partnership and really helps you, because we're really able to do a lot of things that make sure that these OpenSIP endpoints work really well in the AS environment. Next slide, Greg. In addition to the phones, we've also, Greg showed you a picture, I think in the ESC and the LSC pictures, he showed you the Polycom RMX. So that is our multi-point video multiplexing device, and that's available and saleable. It's been JITC tested and certified. We just recertified it through the labs here in October, along with the Trio. And as a matter of fact, I don't have this slide. This wasn't updated with the Trio software, but 5.7.1 and 8.6 on the RMX. And there's also a device that's called the DMA, which is our call control for that, 6.0.4. Those have all made it through the lab this last October, so JITC certified as well. So we can help you with multi-point video capabilities using our Trio, using the ribbon clients and other video endpoints, some of the other Polycom video endpoints. So if you're looking for a true unified collaboration solution where there's content, where there's video, where there's voice, we can help you with that. We can build that out for you. Next slide, Greg. This is what I talked about a little bit earlier, was the extensive feature capability in black. Those are features that are OpenSIP, standard OpenSIP that we've worked with Ribbon for a long time, because Ribbon's an OpenSIP platform and so are we. In green are things that we've developed specifically based on customer requirements. E911 capabilities, global address book, which is via their SOAPI interface, SLA, SCA on the AS. The Madden SCA is not supported in your environments because you don't use the C20, but we've developed those over time based on customer requirement. Greg, next slide. And we continue to do development. You can see the personal address book and the Buddy Watch with personal address book we've put in, and then you can see the MLP SCA for 5.9 and Q1, and also call forward do not disturb sync, which is important in that you can put a phone on do not disturb or call forward, and it actually synchronizes with the application server, so calls aren't being routed to the phone before the call leg determines that before the application server determines that's on a do not disturb. It happens right in the application server. So pretty important feature, and we'll have that out in our industry release, and that will be probably AS 13.1 sometime in late Q2. Go ahead, Greg. I kind of an eye chart where we are today, just so you know. These are the software versions that we've tested on the provisioning servers that we've tested, and also what features and functions are supported. So just more of a reference chart than anything else. Next slide, Greg. More solutions. Go ahead. Next slide. The Boxbox. I'm speaking to you on a Boxbox today. So Boxbox is a speaker mic that we've made available, and you can see in the picture there that it is actually a USB cable connected to that man's PC as he sits in a huddle room. It's meant to be a huddle room device, but a lot of people are using it as a personal speaker mic device. It's just a small 4x4 square, waterproof, and it can be integrated into a client such that the mute buttons and the volume up and stuff work in conjunction or in correspondence with the client. And we're talking to Ribbon about that. But for today, a really good speaker mic for your GenBand or Ribbon clients. Sorry, I keep using GenBand, but GenCom Smart Office clients. And I am talking to you on it today. So if you like it, then I'm talking to you on it. If you don't, then I'm talking to you on the PC speaker mic. Eagle Eye Mini is another camera that we've introduced, and the reason that we introduced camera is because we've always been a camera company for the last 20 years, and we decided to build our own instead of using Logitech's and other things in our smaller devices. So it works on the VBX. It works as a replacement camera for the VBX. So if you're familiar at all with the VBX camera, you'll note that it snaps into the top. Well, this one snaps into the top using 5.8.1 software, and it works on the legacy VBX 501 and 601, and we will introduce a 501 601 replacement in the X50 line sometime in late Q1, early Q2 19. It also works with the Trio, And then it works with the PC app. So now you've got a Boxbox and you have a really nice camera. So you have a really nice microphone sound user experience, and now you have a really nice camera experience to go on your PC client. And we actually package them together where you can buy them together, a Boxbox and a camera. And then add a headset, add a Plantronics headset, and if you need privacy, and you pretty much got your client all taken care of. Next slide, Greg. Trying to get through these fast. We also have ATAs. So Greg talked about analog. I mentioned that, but we have a full line of ATAs that are compatible with the AS in case you have to do any of those types of things. Next, Greg. Headsets, I'm not going to go through all of these, but understand that Plantronics has a whole line of headsets for any kind of worker, mobile worker, desk worker, call center worker, just a full line of headsets. Headsets are interesting because they're personal. They go on your head. So you have to figure out ear sizes, and you have to figure out who likes cupped ears, who likes cups over the ears, who likes flat earpieces, who likes in the ear, who likes 2 ears. And so there's, when we got into the headset business, I was quite surprised. So we have a lot of headsets, and we'll work with you on the headsets that you need. We also have a hub which allows you to do headset call control between a client and the headset. So hang up, mute, answer a call from the headset. You do that with a Polycom hub client which sits on your PC. Go ahead, Greg. And then that hub client and that headset are then managed from a cloud service we call Plantronics Manager Pro. So just understand that there's a way to manage your headsets in your environments, especially if you're deploying call centers. It's great. You can look at software, you can look at types of headsets, and you can look at telemetry information like volume, what the volume on the headset is set for, how your users use that headset. And you can look at talkover as well. So are my people talking over their customers or the people that are calling in to them for help? Or are they listening? So there's a lot of things, a lot of metrics that you can get from the headset using the Manager Pro. So between our cloud offering to manage the phones and our cloud offering to manage the headsets, there's some great control over those endpoints that you've never had before. Next slide, Greg. Let's go, because that one I pretty much just talked about. Okay, wrapping it up. I think that's back to you, Greg or Lance.
It's back to me. Thanks a lot, Dave. And I apologize. Based on how I turned those slides, it appears that my opportunity to take over for Vanna White is greatly diminished based on that performance. But I did my best. Just to wrap it up, just kind of give a quick summary here of the joint value proposition. I think Dave and I kind of touched on most of these key points. Almost an infinitely scalable solution. It's proven in a variety of environments, both in commercial deployments as well as the DoD environments. And one of the things to keep in mind when we talk a bit about some of this carrier stuff, reliability in our world is measured by people like the Public Utility Commission. So it's not just a nice thing to put on a slide. It's sort of business impacting, and obviously that's one of the reasons why we've, I think, had so much engagement across the DoD. A rich set of services, and I think it's great that Dave talked about not just things that are immediately in our JITC certification, but some directional as well about the opportunity to combine together other assets in the Polycom portfolio to create different environments for things like contact center and remote workers. And of course, open. Dave mentioned it. I'll kind of add to it. He and I have been on a conference call every Wednesday at noon for 5 years together, and that just sort of speaks to the amount of integration that our two companies have worked on in that period of time. So we have multiple calls per week as an organization. We have relationships at the services level. We have relationships at a marketing level. We have relationships at a product level and an executive level. So at every point in the sort of business environment, we are connected as two organizations. And I think once you do business with us, you'll come to appreciate how impactful and important that is. And having that means that you get the kind of functionality and relationship that traditionally was only available from a proprietary environment. We had to buy it all from one vendor, but you get the benefit of the fact that you're not exclusively locked into either of us. So that's a win-win as far as we're concerned. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lance to see if we might have any questions that have come up while we've been doing all this talking.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Yeah, we sure have. So thank everyone for participating in the Q&A here. So just a couple questions to go through. The first one, a little detailed, so hopefully I'll read this the correct way. But the question is this system capable of implementing the 911 auto dial directly to civilian 911 operators with a monitoring only feature with the Base Defense Operations Center?
That is a detailed question. I'm certainly aware of the fact that we could do something like a sim ring to those two environments. In terms of a monitor only feature, I'm going to have to do a little digging and get back to the person who asked the question. We have everyone's email, so we're more than happy. I'll follow up personally and make sure that I connect with you, and we'll get you an answer to that question in the next day or so. So that's detailed enough that I don't want to make a mistake and get, especially when it comes to 911. Other questions?
Yeah, so we'll follow up with that one. The other question we had was, I know you mentioned a reference deployment that we have. Is that a public deployment?
It is. There's been a press release on it. This particular deployment, the most recent one I'm referring to, was done by Verizon and Blackbox as our partners. But you can find it if you type in Ribbon and Department of Defense. You can also find it on our website under press releases. And lastly, you can find it under our dedicated landing page, jitic.rbbn.com. So you can read some of those details in there.
Okay. Question about Polycom here, Polycom phones. Do they support MLPP?
Yes, they do. As of last year, and then MLPP SCA as of January of this coming year.
Okay, so yes, they do support MLPP. Last question I have really is about how can they reach out to partners? Do we have partners that they should be reaching out to?
Yeah, we do. There are a number of partners for both Polycom and Ribbon who support our DoD deployments. I happened to mention a couple a moment ago that are specifically related to the public reference, but we have a number of others as well. If someone wants to reach out after this webinar, you can connect with us, and we'll be happy to connect you with a partner who's appropriate for whatever your deployment requirements are. But there's a fairly broad group of partners across who are DoD partners who can support one of these deployments.